Let's talk about wide receivers you should start or sit in week 11 of the fantasy football season. The good news is we have less teams on bye than previous weeks, only two. The bad news is it's the Colts and the Saints. Very important names here to a lot of your rosters like Michael Pittman and Alec Pierce, Downs, Chris Olave. You will not have these guys, but don't worry. I'm going through every single matchup in today's video. You've got time codes that you can go to if you want to look at a specific matchup, and you will have my rankings for every single wide receiver. So I'm going to help you set those lineups. Let's go to Thursday night to start here. Jets at Patriots, 44.5 point over under. The Patriots are heavy favorites, as they should be, 10.5 points. That line could probably move even more in their favor. For the Jets wide receivers, there's nothing. There's nothing. I know the Pats are a great matchup. They're a top 5 matchup, but the reality is you just cannot start anybody in New York this week on a short week. Garrett Wilson is going to miss at least 3 to 4 weeks with that knee sprain. It popped up again, the same one that he was dealing with. He's not going to be there this week and next week. And also Justin Fields, if he's starting, which I don't know if he is, it might be Tyrod Taylor at this point. I don't know at the time of recording, but check this out. Fewest passing yards by a quarterback through 8 starts in a season since 2000. Justin Fields is on a very short list of guys that have barely thrown any passing yards. So it will be fun to see Adonai Mitchell finally playing for this team. He's a fun stash in a deeper league. You should stash him. But I have no idea if Arian Smith or some other no name is going to get enough yardage to warrant a start in fantasy. I'm not playing around with it. On the opposite side of this ball, I do think Stephon Diggs is a must start. Now, I'm assuming that Kayshon Boutte is not playing in this game. He was a projected limited participant in practice on Monday. So I'm only starting Diggs if there's no Boutte. But if Boutte is out there playing, if he's active, let's live in that world for a second, then Diggs becomes more of a spot start because we know Boutte sometimes sucks away that ceiling from a Stephon Diggs because of the amount of touchdowns Boutte's had this year. So Diggs would be a spot start. I wouldn't really trust Boutte on such a short week in a game where they probably don't need to throw the ball much. If anything, I lean on more wide receivers disappointing us this week than not for New England, just because game script wise, I assume Henderson is going to have a decent game, and Stevenson, if he's out there, Terrell Jennings, I think they're going to run the ball a lot in New England. Okay, we do have an international game this week. That is the Commanders at the Dolphins, and it's in Madrid. My goodness, NFL, really? You're going to show the Spanish people, first game in Spain, if I'm not mistaken. I could be mistaken. You're going to show them Commanders at Dolphins? My gosh, man, like what a disappointing example of the NFL Spain is going to get here. But high over under 47.5 points. And here's the good news. Both of these teams suck. Both of these teams are terrible. So at least that means both offenses should be able to function because both defenses are terrible, right? That's the good news. Now, for the Commanders, it's not a great matchup against the Dolphins. Terry McLaurin's been ruled out. Treylon Burks, who actually led this team in receiving yards last week, is not going to play. He had a finger surgery, so he's not out there. The only guy that you can even think about starting is Deebo Samuel. He did lead the way last week, 42 snaps. No one else even came close with the wide receivers. He had 5 targets, ended up getting into the end zone, which completely saved his day. Half of his points came from that touchdown. So look, I think it's risky, but in the event where the Dolphins are up, Deebo could have a fine day if they need to throw the ball. He's my wide receiver 36, low end wide receiver 3, high end wide receiver 4, a desperation flex at best. On the opposite side there with Miami, we're going to continue to start Jalen Waddle. He's been so consistent, so reliable in fantasy football since the injury to Tyreek Hill. So he's a continually reliable part of your fantasy teams at this point. Last Sunday against the Bills, he had 7 targets, turned those 7 targets into 19 fantasy points, got into the end zone, 84 yards. He's the premier weapon in this offense, not named Devon Achane. So the Commanders' defense is terrible. Their secondary is completely destroyed. Not only did Lattimore go out for the year, but also their young, exciting rookie Trey Amos is out for the year. They're like my flock league team. They're constantly getting injured, so you can play Waddle with a ton of confidence. Okay, that brings us to the start of the first slate of Sunday games. We've got the Panthers at the Falcons. Tetairoa McMillan is a spot start at this point. You know, there's a little bit good news, bad news, for a T-Mac. The good news is, if you're a Panthers fan, there's just no doubt about it. This kid is a future dominant X alpha wide receiver. He's got everything. Everything's in that bag, and he's cooking every single week. Last week, he had 8 targets. He's constantly leading the team in targets, over a 27% target share, dominating total team receiving yard percentage. But the issue is Bryce Young he's just not good, man. You're not, the Panthers are not winning games because of Bryce Young. They're winning games in spite of Bryce Young. Bryce Young's big time throw percentage is terrible this year. His yards per attempt, is very low. He's scared to turn the ball over. He's not throwing the ball down the field. They're running the ball a lot. So even when Tet gets 8 targets, it typically only turns into 10 or more fantasy points. So he's a safe floor type of player, but unfortunately the ceiling isn't there right now because Bryce Young, stop being a little scaled baby. Throw the ball down the field, Bryce, okay? It's going to be okay. That's why you drafted Tet to Roa McMillan. But he's my wide receiver 23. You can play him for sure in plenty of leagues. On the opposite side, how about Drizzy Drake London, man? Wide receiver 1 in back-to-back weeks, which is awesome to see as someone who owns him in the Flock League. He's been so good. And every time he goes up for these crazy catches, I'm always worried he's going to get injured, but hopefully he's going to be all right. Last week, 7 targets, turned that into 22.4 fantasy points, 106 yards, and a touchdown. You're going to play him. Here's the issue with Darnell Mooney. He's getting targets, but there's no chemistry between him and Michael Penix. So he's a Hail Mary desperation play at best. It's not even a good matchup against the Panthers. I would be very, very hesitant. Okay, that takes us to the Bucks at the Bills. 49.5 point over under. Lots of points expected from Vegas. The Bills are favored by 5.5 points. Khalil Shakir is still to this day the only name that I trust in Buffalo. Look, I know that last week we finally saw Keon Coleman get involved in this wide receiver room. He had 8 targets, which is great. He ended up coming down with one of those big touchdowns down the side of the field, 46 yards a touchdown. But still, all of his production came from that one play, really, and he's been completely inconsistent. You need game scripts where the Bills are heavily down in games and needing to throw. And if you don't have that game script, Keon Coleman is probably useless. So I'm still going to sit Keon Coleman. If you're going to start one of these names, it is Khalil Shakir. He doesn't have the highest ceiling. He's basically Wan'Dale Robinson, but he's attached to Josh Allen, so he's a little bit more reliable. He's my wide receiver 32, a flexible name. On the opposite side there, Emeka Egbuka is a must start. He continues to show why he's worthy of being a first-round wide receiver, why he's worthy of being a must start locked and loaded into your lineup every single week. Has a connection with Baker Mayfield. It's awesome. It's beautiful to watch. Poetry in motion. For Tez Johnson, he is going to be a spot start for me. We really love Tez Johnson coming out of Oregon. He is basically a Tank Dell, but a little bit smaller. And guess what? It doesn't matter that he's 160 pounds. If he can get open, if he can catch touchdowns, he's going to be productive for Baker Mayfield's offense. We saw that last week where the Bucs were down against the Patriots. He was a great weapon for him in the end zone. He's constantly making big plays. He had 5 targets, came down with 4 of them for 42 yards and 2 touchdowns, over 20 fantasy points. He's going to continue to be a big play threat for Baker Mayfield, who's not afraid to throw the ball down the field. My wide receiver 26, I would actually prefer to play Tez Johnson over Shakir in this matchup, but both are great flexible names this week. Unfortunately, no Chris Godwin this week. He's not going to be practicing. We have no idea when he's going to be back. Don't expect him back anytime soon. Okay, that brings us to Chargers at Jags, 44.5 point over under. For the Chargers receivers, Oronde Gadsden, we don't know if he's going to miss time. He did avoid a serious injury. He might play this week. If he plays this week, lower your expectations for these Charger receivers. If he doesn't, then you can potentially see bigger gains for Keenan and Quentin Johnston. Ladd McConkey must start each and every week. He's been fantastic, finally showing and reminding everyone why he was such a good player last year and why we were all excited about him this year. Quentin Johnston starting to get a little bit more reliable. As far as a floor for fantasy, it was either the roller coaster experience with him earlier on in the year, right? But unfortunately, he's not converting on all of his targets. He had 8 targets last week and turned it into 9 fantasy points. A couple drops, a couple bad throws. So he's my wide receiver 22, a decent spot start. And unfortunately for Keenan Allen, his ceiling has just completely evaporated in this offense, right? He's an older player. He started off hot, but since week number 6, he's only had 1 game over 9 PPR points. So he is definitely a risky play at best. And they're starting to feature the younger players, which honestly, they should. On the opposite side, I do think we didn't see the full Jacoby Myers experience last week. And obviously, we were never going to because it was a short week for the Jaguars. But you did see him involved in this offense in a short week, 27 snaps, 3 targets. I do anticipate him being a bigger part of this offense moving forward. I do prefer him over Parker Washington. If you're going to start one of these guys, I've labeled them both risky starts. Here's the issue. The issue is it's a terrible matchup against the Chargers. The 4th worst matchup for your fantasy wide receivers. The Chargers just typically shut down your receivers. So I'd prefer not to play either of these names. If you're going to play one of them, I would play Jacoby Myers. Although it has been fun to see Parker Washington featured not only as a special teamer, but also in the end zone. It's been awesome to see him and Trevor Lawrence's connection. He's a great player. Now, I'm ranking these guys as if Brian Thomas is not playing. If Brian Thomas is active this week, it just makes everything messy, and I prefer to completely avoid it. But you can see my rankings in the event that happens. Okay, let's go to the Bears at the Vikings. And this matchup, there are a lot of names that you could start and a lot of names that you probably shouldn't. What do I mean by that? Well, look, technically, if DJ Moore is not active, you could start Luther Burden. You could start Zacchaeus. Technically, you could start Jalen Naylor because of the connection he has with JJ McCarthy, but all those guys are risky starts at best. It's Rome Odunze. I trust him, even though there is goose potential like there is for any player. And it's Justin Jefferson. Justin Jefferson, even though it was a bad week last week for the Vikings, honestly, JJ McCarthy did not look good. He threw a couple interceptions. But the good news is Jefferson had 12 targets, and he gets to face the Bears this week, which is a top 4 matchup for your fantasy wide receivers. So while he's not in my top 10, I still have labeled him a must start. Jordan Addison is a little bit more concerning to me. I'll be honest with you guys. It's a good matchup for him as well, but he is just not getting peppered and not getting reliable targets the same way that he was with Carson Wentz. I've labeled him my wide receiver 30, a spot start. He's a flex play at this point, but man, I'd be very cautious if you're in a smaller league and you have a better option. Now, if DJ Moore is active, then I don't want to play any of these other names in Chicago. It's really just Rome Odunze that I'm confident in this week. Okay, let's go to the Packers at the Giants. Now, 44.5 point over under. Packers are favored by 7.5 points. They should win this game in New York. At the time of recording this, I don't really know if Romeo Doubs is going to be healthy or not. He left last week's game with a chest injury, and then we saw Dontavion Wicks lead the way in targets with 6. You saw Luke Musgrave a little bit involved. Watson had a couple targets, but really it was Dontavion Wicks's, world, if you will. Now, I'm ranking these guys as if Dobbs will be out there. I still prefer Dobbs as a flexible name. Certainly not a must start in this matchup. Christian Watson, Dontavion Wicks are names that you could consider for sure. But this Packer wide receiver room, man, is too much Russian roulette on a weekly basis. You just never know which guy is going to be featured. And unfortunately, even with Tucker Kraft's injury, you still don't know the answer. You saw that against the Eagles defense last Monday Night Football. What I will say is the Giants secondary is nowhere near as scary as the Eagles secondary. So we should see a bounce back for one of these names. If Romeo Doubs is out, then I do actually prefer Dontavion Wicks. I just think he would get more of that intermediate work, whereas Christian Watson, I don't believe his role will change as more of the field stretcher for this team. But I will say it's a great matchup for your Packer wide receivers. So one of them is going to bounce back. If you want to get up, if you want to kind of play the Russian roulette, then, we've gone through those scenarios. On the opposite side there, I do think both Wan'Dale Robinson and Darius Slayton are decent spot starts. I prefer Wan'Dale Robinson, but Darius Slayton, if he is healthy, and we don't know that right now, I don't know that answer. If he is healthy, he's becoming a very important part of this offense. Last week, remember he had the injury, but he had 45 snaps before the injury, 4 targets, turned that into 12.9 fantasy points, is getting targeted down the field, intermediately, all over the place. Wan'Dale Robinson continues to be the most consistent, reliable floor in fantasy football for wide receivers. That's why he's a flex name for us, our wide receiver 27, a spot start. So just quickly, I want you guys to know that there is a free feature on the Flock site called the My Teams feature. If you sign up using my promo code LAND for a free account, you will gain access to the My Teams feature where you'll see expert consensus opinion, rankings, recent trades. So check that out in the pinned comment completely free if you want to use that as your secret weapon. Okay, let's go to the Bengals at the Steelers. 50.5 point over under, one of the highest of the week. Steelers are favored by 5.5 points. I don't know if you guys remember the last time these two teams played. It was a Thursday night and both offenses went crazy. So many fantasy points. I would be shocked if we don't see the same exact thing. The Steelers defense has got better. I will admit that. Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, both non-negotiable must starts in your lineups this week. With Joe Flacco, he's just turned them into fantasy superstars. The same thing that Joe Burrow did for them, right? Speaking of Joe Burrow, he's come back from IR, not ready to play just yet, but his 21-day practice window has opened, so he will be playing for the Bengals within the next 3 weeks. He is guaranteed to be out there, or they have to shut him down for the entirety of the season. So that's very exciting. If you own a Chase or a Higgins, they might be decent buy lows. Well, you can't buy Chase, but you might be able to still buy T. Higgins before Joe Burrow comes back. Now, with the Steelers side of the ball, DK Metcalf is the only name that I would start, but he is going to be inconsistent. That is the nature of an Arthur Smith offense. Doesn't matter if you're the number one, the number two, number three, you're going to have boom and bust games. But because of the nature of the offense they're facing, the Bengals, high-powered, so many superstars across the board, I do think you can start Metcalf with a little more confidence this week than a lot of you are anticipating. I do believe Aaron Rodgers is going to have to throw the ball, and Rodgers himself is not a bad spot start for quarterbacks this week. Okay, let's go to the Texans at the Titans. Very low over-under. Texans are favored. CJ Stroud is still in concussion protocol at the time of recording this video. But thankfully, whether CJ is out there or not, Davis Mills showed that he can supply Nico Collins with plenty of targets. Last time out, I mean, maybe you prefer CJ to take another week off, because last time out, Nico Collins with Davis Mills had his season high in targets with 15. Season high in receiving yards with 136. So maybe you prefer CJ Stroud to not be out there. Regardless, you're going to start Nico Collins in this matchup. He's the only player that I can tell you to start with any confidence. I will say it was awesome to see our guy Jaden Higgins get more work in last week's game with Davis Mills under center. He had 7 targets, was second in snaps, was third in routes run, and was featured a little bit more. Got into the end zone, 5 catches, 42 yards, a touchdown, 15 fantasy points. He's worth the stash, but until they get rid of the Kirks and, the Hutchinsons and the Braxton Berrioses, then it's going to be really hard to trust the Jaden Higgins and the Christian Kirks. So for now, I don't think you start those guys. Also not sure how much the Texans will need to throw. And then on the opposite side there, I don't really want to start anyone. It's a terrible matchup against the Texans. The worst matchup for your wide receivers. If you're going to throw a Hail Mary on anyone, for me, it's Chimere DK, just because he's had the most success consistently with Cam Ward in the last couple of weeks. Okay, that takes us to the start of the second slate of games. 49ers and the Cardinals. We've got a 48.5 point over under, which is pretty high. Niners are favored by 3 points. Two defenses that are middle of the pack against wide receivers in fantasy football. For the 49ers, there's a chance we could see Brock Purdy this week. I don't think it's really going to change the way I rank these receivers. Mac Jones has been completely fine in place of him. Of course, we prefer Brock Purdy, but Mac Jones has been completely fine. He's been great. Juwan Jennings is a spot start for me because I'm ranking these guys as if Ricky Pearsall is going to be activated and ready to play this week. He is practicing or expected to practice this week with that knee injury, so I can't guarantee it at the time of recording this, but the reason I'm not labeling Juwan Jennings a must start, the only reason, is because I do think Ricky Pearsall will be back out there this week. Last week, without Ricky Pearsall, Juwan Jennings had 9 targets, caught 6 of them for 71 yards and a touchdown, clearly has that chemistry with Mac Jones. That's why even with Ricky Pearsall ready to go this week, most likely, I still would prefer Jennings in a vacuum. Both are decent plays against the Cardinals. It should be a competitive game, should be a close one, divisional matchup. Now, with Jennings and Pearsall both being ready to go, I probably would not suggest for anyone to play Kendrick Bourne. He's probably droppable, not even thinkable at this point. Sure, he could make a big play at any moment, but you're not going to start him with any confidence. On the opposite side, we're going to continue to start Marvin Harrison Jr. with no Kyler Murray. I know it didn't feel like it last week, but no Kyler Murray is better than having Kyler Murray for the Arizona Cardinals. The bad news is 12 targets for Marvin turned into 3 catches for 33 yards and a touchdown. Thank God he got a touchdown, or you would be even more disappointed. But still, it shows with the 12 targets that Jacoby Brissett is not going to be afraid to feature Marvin Harrison Jr. That's what we love to see. That's why he's labeled a must start in a game where I would anticipate the Cardinals coming back from behind. Let's go to Seahawks at Rams. 48.5 over under. Rams are favored, but it's a very close spread, so this could go either way. Divisional game in Los Angeles. There should be a lot of Seahawks fans in those stands as well. JSN, the wide receiver one for me this week. He's been fantastic. He's been such a superstar this year. So glad to see him finally get his. If you actually look at target share by game, he's been ridiculous. 2 games over 50% target share. Jamar Chase is the only player with a 50% target share game this season, and he's only had 1. JSN has been just completely ridiculous, man. It's been insane to see him outworked in this offense. Now, unfortunately for all of the Rashid Shaheed owners, you didn't really get to see a big mix of him this week. To be fair, they were up by 35 points in the second quarter, so you really didn't need to use Rashid Shaheed, but just 21 snaps. That ranks 4th amongst wide receivers last week. Just 8 routes run. That is, again, 4th or 3rd, sorry. He had 1 target, 2 carries. So they didn't really need to use him. My concern with Shaheed is there's potential that he's just a deep threat. Think about Jameson Williams at time where, they might not need to use him because the team is too good. They'll be up in games and he's a deep threat. He's an electric guy, but you really only use him in certain, scenarios. So I would say he's a risky play right now. I could see him having a big game, but I just need to see it before I believe it in Seattle. He's the perfect fit for the real team. I don't know if you can trust him in fantasy football. And then let's keep it short and simple. Devontae Adams, Puka Nacua, must starts. They've been must starts for me every week. Week 1, they'll continue to be must starts for me every week all the way up until week number 17, week number 18. And I can't tell you if Devontae Adams is going to play, but I assume he will. Okay, let's go to the Ravens at the Browns. 41.5 over under. Ravens are favored by about 9 points in this game. Zay Flowers is going to be a must start for me. Rashad Bateman was diagnosed with an ankle sprain. It shouldn't be long term, but I don't anticipate him being out there. So that gives me a little more confidence in Zay Flowers because it's a small pie in Baltimore with the amount of times that they run the ball there, but it's a bigger portion of that pie now for Zay Flowers. On the opposite side of the ball, I still don't trust any Browns wide receiver. Look, maybe you can start Jerry Jeudy if you really want to throw out a Hail Mary. Yes, he had 12 targets in last week's game. He led the team in snaps, routes run, and he ended up getting into the end zone, 78 yards, a touchdown, almost 20 PPR points. He's more of a stash than a true start, in my opinion. I know the Ravens are a good matchup, but the reality is we've seen plenty of games this year, double-digit targets, where he is not on the same page with his quarterback, where he is dropping balls. The offense isn't sustaining drives. I just don't trust it, even though we've seen it just one single week. I prefer to sit him. Maybe you can start him if you're in a desperate situation. All right, let's go to the Chiefs at the Broncos. 44.5 over under. Chiefs are favored by 3.5 points, even though it's in Denver. And honestly, I get it. That offense is ridiculous with Kansas City, and they're also missing Patrick Surtain. That's great news for Xavier Worthy, Rashee Rice. Obviously, the Denver Broncos defense is still very good, but Rashee Rice, alpha. If you ended up, drafting him and waiting on him, you are being well rewarded at this point. My wide receiver 5 this week, even though it's one of the most difficult matchups for your wide receivers, you're going to start him. Xavier Worthy, honestly, it doesn't really matter if the Chiefs have a good or a bad matchup. He's kind of Jameson Williams at this point, boom, bust, but maybe a little bit less consistent than Jameson Williams. He's going to have big games. You just don't know when it is. So he is in that Rashid Shaheed, Xavier Worthy, Jameson Williams, type of range. He's a flexible option for sure. On the opposite side with the Denver Broncos, this wide receiver room is incredibly difficult to digest. Let's check out the last month for Franklin and Courtland Sutton, according to Jacob Gibbs. If you look at target share, Troy Franklin at 27%, Sutton at 19%. Air yardage share is ridiculous. Franklin at 47%, Sutton at 27%, and PPR points per game, Franklin at almost 16, Sutton at 11. What's probably happening, and I haven't watched the film myself, is you're seeing a lot of defenses start to double team and shadow Courtland Sutton, which is leaving Franklin in more, situations that he can take advantage of. Unfortunately, Franklin is not taking advantage of every situation. He's dropping a lot of passes. He's making a lot of mental errors. And this is a terrible matchup for both Sutton and Franklin. The Chiefs are the third worst matchup for your fantasy wide receivers. I don't trust Bo Nix the way I trust Patrick Mahomes to overcome a bad defense. So Sutton, I still prefer to start him just because he is the alpha. I know that sounds crazy, but I still prefer him if you're going to start one of these names. But he's a flexible name, a wide receiver 3, high-end wide receiver 4 at best. Franklin, I don't trust in this matchup. The Chiefs defense is too good, but he is a Hail Mary play that you can put out there if you want to play someone that, you don't have anyone else in your lineup that you can trust. That takes us to Sunday Night Football. We've got the Lions at the Eagles, 48.5 point over under. The Eagles are favored, but it's a very close spread in Philadelphia. Amon-Ra St. Brown, of course you're going to start him. A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, I know it's been up and down, but these guys are going to be in your lineup. You can't get the boom without the bust, so you got to put them in there if you want the boom. But they're my wide receiver 18 and 19 this week. Should be a great game. The Lions should be able to score against the Eagles, and the Eagles should need to throw. So that's a very positive game script for Philadelphia. Now, Jameson Williams is really the name that we need to talk about. My guy this year, a lot of you guys would know that, was really high on him, had such high expectations, and obviously John Morton completely destroyed that, didn't use him at all before the bye. But obviously, Dan Campbell took over the play calling duties this last week, and both Amon-Ra and Jameson Williams both got their opportunities. 7 targets for Jameson, 8 for Amon-Ra. They were using Jameson Williams on a lot more of those easy over the middle of the field catches, not just the deep ball, which is awesome to see. I do think Jameson Williams is a great flex option. He's back on the menu, boys. All right, last week we did finish 10th in the FastDraft Quick 6 Super Slam contest. I want to get first again like we got in week 8. You can see the lineup that we used in week number 10. I won some money. I want to win again in week number 11. So I'm going to submit my lineups. You can submit yours. It's very simple. All you have to do is choose 6 down quarterbacks and set your boosters. Download the FastDraft app. Use my promo code LAND. I'll match your deposit up to $50. And then you're going to get my week 11 rankings completely free. You can check that out in the pinned comment if you want to have some fun. Okay, and girls. Monday Night Football. We've got Cowboys at Raiders. CeeDee Lamb, George Pickens, you're going to start them. No doubt about that. High over under, elite offense, 50.5 point over under. Raiders are a top 8 matchup for your fantasy wide receivers. Now, with the Raiders, that's what we really need to discuss. Sure, you can, in theory, start Trey Tucker. I don't have a lot of confidence in doing that. If you guys remember on Thursday Night Football, in a game where the Raiders needed to throw, without Jacoby Myers for the first time, Trey Tucker had just 3 targets. Thornton had 2. Lockett had 6. Lockett is probably going to be everybody's desperation flex this entire week. And I get it because the Cowboys are the best matchup for your fantasy wide receivers. But do you trust Geno Smith? Do you trust the Raiders offense to extend drives? Quinnen Williams is now on the Cowboys. How will he impact the defense for the Cowboys? So look, you can start Tucker, you can start Lockett, but they are not confident starts by any means. My wide receiver 37, my wide receiver 34, most of you, 90% of you will have better options. I'm just not willing to play a wide receiver attached to Geno Smith at this very present moment. Guys, I appreciate you watching the video. Do me a favor, hit the like button to show some love if you liked the video. Subscribe if you found any value. And by the way, our running backs video is already out on the channel, so you can go check that out as well if you like. All right, love. Draft with me every night this week on the FastDraft app, where there are thousands of dollars to be won weekly. Getting started is easy. Download the FastDraft app, use the promo code LAND at signup to get your deposit match up to $50. That's up to 10 free entries on us. And when you finish your first DFS contest, I'll send you my weekly rankings completely free. Check out the link in the pinned comment to start drafting today.